Game of Thrones' showrunners hated magic just about as much as they hated women, making it very apparent why Viserion, the one dragon that everyone thinks is female, is the one that they so unceremoniously and stupidly kill off. Now, if you're a dude bro in my comments, you might be tempted to say something like, Ronnie, I think that's a bit of a stretch. But allow me to explain why A, I don't think it's a stretch, and B, this overall is a really stupid fucking decision. Something that became very apparent as you watch the back half of the series when, they A, stopped caring about the remaining books and then B, started making up, shit on their own, is that they were very keenly aware of all of the fan theories that were circulating around online. In fact, one of the well-known jokes in the fandom is that they didn't even really bother to read a bunch of the books and just, use the fan theories online and, the summaries online to kind of piece together what was supposed to happen. Like, I'm sure they read them, but they skimmed at best. And we know that they were keenly aware of a lot of the fan theories online because there are some that they do incorporate into the show that, I'm sorry, have absolutely no setup and is just fan service. Like, I'm sorry, if you like Cleganebowl, that's cool, that's good for you. This shit makes no sense narrative-wise. Why does the Hound have a beef with his undead zombie brother? Like, that isn't his brother anymore. This makes no sense. But it was a well-known fan theory that existed online, that even got its own name, Cleganebowl. So in the absence of being able to, tie up the story in the way that George intended it, because, by that point, they had dropped basically the last two books. I'm sorry, they barely adapt the last two books. There are all these threads and storylines that are dropped, and, this is why the ending makes no sense, because all the things that could potentially maybe lead to some of these elements aren't there. But in the absence of that, what are we going to do? Okay, we're going to include the fan service that we personally like. So something like Cleganebowl smells of them 1,000%. It's something that they would think is like interesting and badass, and that they're going to throw in there, because that's all that they can throw in at this point. And I can also argue that, several of the other big fan theories that they particularly liked make their way into the show. Whether or not there are elements of it in the book is unclear. I would argue that for certain they loved the whole Lyanna and Rhaegar equal Jon, R plus L equals J. I'm sure they loved that. That's probably how they got the gig, because they just loved that theory. I also am of the personal opinion that that's probably how Mad Queen Dany ends up in the series as it does, because that was another well-known fan theory at the time that they probably thought was really badass. It's stupid in my opinion, but here we are. And so with limited options, they lean back on the ideas that already existed. So when y'all joke that ooh, George is watching my videos and taking notes, I think that that's literally what they did, but with Reddit, 10 years ago. And so this leads me to Viserion, because there was a fan theory online for a bit about, the concept of ice dragons, and if ice dragons are going to appear in the series. I've even gotten requests to, talk about them as they exist in the lore, because in the books, we do not see an ice dragon, though we hear about them. So in my opinion, the whole Viserion being killed by the Night King and resurrected as an ice dragon is a nod to that fan theory as a way of connecting the dots from A to B for how the wall gets destroyed, because, the actual reasons or the actual, machinations of how the wall will come down was kind of thrown away by the time they got to this point in the series. And I'm sure some of you will be like, Ronnie, you're making a big claim that you know how the wall is going to come down. I'm like, no, I don't know exactly how the wall is going to come down, but I am certain it is going to have something to do with all the crazy horns that we keep hearing about. Because a big element of the lore that you hear about in multiple books throughout the series and yet never makes it into the show, probably because it's too magical and boring, is the Horn of Joramun, which is this legendary horn said to have the ability, if blown, to bring down the wall. When Mance Rayder is threatening to, overtake the wall, when Jon Snow and the Night's Watch are defending it from him, he claims that he has found the Horn of Joramun in a really ancient wildling grave, and that he's going to use it if they don't let them through. Later, we find out, I think from Tormund, that it wasn't actually the Horn of Joramun. They found a horn, it was very old, but it wasn't actually, the real deal. And then either way, Melisandre burns it, so it's not going to mean anything now. Except there was another horn that was very conspicuously found by none other than Samwell Tarly. Because if you remember, when Sam is north of the wall with like the big ranging party, when Mormont takes them all over there, he finds this random like stash of weapons in the ground. It's this big pile of dragon glass, the obsidian, which is that glass that can kill, you know, the others and the whites and the White Walkers, etc. And then alongside that, he finds this very old horn, which he keeps because he's like, oh, weird that it's in here, but that's cool. I'm going to keep it. And they mention it a few times throughout the series. And I'm sorry, but if that isn't some planting right there, I don't know what is. That is the Horn of Jorman. I am sure of it. Now, how it makes it back to the wall, how it gets used, that I don't know. But like, I'm sorry, you can't plant that many tidbits, all these like conspicuous details, and then not use them later. I personally cannot see that happening. But because the show didn't care about the Horn of Jorman, you get Viserion being unceremoniously killed because we need like a cheat code at this point. To go back to my earlier point about D&D, the showrunners being, you know, misogynists, there is another very well-known theory about Viserion, that Viserion is a female dragon. And I also subscribe to this theory because I think the evidence is I think obvious enough that I am at least intrigued by it and think it's very plausible. But basically, in the fifth book, so spoilers for A Dance with Dragons, in the fifth book, when Viserion and Rhaegal are, you know, imprisoned underneath the Pyramid of Meereen, and then Quentin Martell tries to sneak in to claim one of the dragons, thinking like, oh, I am distantly related to Targaryens, I'm Blood of the Dragon, I can do it. He doesn't. But when he tries to do that, they notice that Viserion has been like nesting and has like dug into the bottom of the pyramid and created like this little nest where Viserion is like staying. And so the theory is that, oh, that's nesting behavior. That is a female dragon. She is about to lay eggs. Yes, we can argue about like the verbiage and like dragons might not have a sex and so yada yada. Yes, I agree with all that. I'm just using this for simplicity's sake. A laying dragon. Cool. So I'm of the opinion that D&D fully knew that, did not care because, you know, they don't care about the magical elements of the show. And they're like, okay, so if we need a dragon as a cheat code to help our Night King, our show invention possibly, to help him, you know, bring down the wall, let's just make it Viserion. Because Drogon has to be Dany's because he's the dark one and the big one, the scary one. And then Rhaegal, the fan theory online is that Rhaegal would be Jon's dragon because Rhaegal is named after Rhaegar. And if we accept that Jon is Rhaegar's son, blah, 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 that's his dragon. So we can't do that because it's the cool boy's dragon. So the girl dragon gets to die. Cool. I apologize if my thought process is a little convoluted tonight, but we got there. Now, as for why this is a stupid decision, beyond the fact that, you know, it hasn't been set up at all, in my opinion. I think there is set up for other means in the books. It's a huge disregard to the dragons, to this hugely important element of the story. Again, they are the fire of the Song of Ice and Fire. Daenerys and her dragons are the embodiment of fire, the embodiment of goodness, yada, yada, yada. And if you disagree, like, go listen to George say it. You don't have to take it from me, okay? I don't want to hear it in the comments. So these are set up as this, you know, huge magical oppositional force to the ice magic of the others. And this just feels like an amalgamation of a bunch of theories that they were, you know, trying to use to get to the destination that they wanted. The issue is, to get to the destination that they wanted, they are having to ignore a lot of the logic of the universe, or at least a lot of the logic of the narrative, and using the dragons this way, using Dany the way that they did, I don't think makes sense. Because we establish in the narrative that, you know, the Targaryens survived the doom for a reason. We later learn of the Song of Ice and Fire. It's important that a Targaryen is there to, you know, beat the cold. So the Targaryens are crucial to defeating the others and the White Walkers, and by the time we get to the modern day, the only ones that are left are Dany and like Jon-ish. When you know, Dany performs a miracle and brings dragons back into the world. This force that can fight the other force. But oh no, none of that matters. The Targaryens being necessary to fight in the Long Night isn't necessary. The dragons aren't necessary. In fact, the dragons are used to, you know, create it, to start it happening again. And then the Long Night is, you know, dealt with very quickly. But then, oh no, the real danger to the realm was Dany and her cuckoo-ness and the dragons, which is why she has to be put down like old Yeller. But wait, so the Targaryens survived so that they could cause the problems that another Targaryen would then have to fix? Why don't they just not survive in the first place, and then none of this would happen? Do you see how it doesn't make sense? So really, Viserion should never have been killed, and that's why I hate it. Okay, goodbye.